Hey everyone, it's Rob Ryder. Today, lawmakers and lawyers versus laws of armed conflict. Hey, lawmakers and lawyers, take notice. The United States is under the laws of armed conflict, and you are acting as enemy combatants. And I informed you of this fact on Friday, November 23rd, 2018. And if you do not cease and desist, then people like this are going to come and detain you. And they're going to be asking for more than just your ID. And if you don't believe that they have the authority in the United States to do so, I beg to differ. Hey, is that a gold fringe flag in the background behind the Army? Hey, you want to know why? Why, it's an Army flag. All them courts flying that flag, that's Armies. Well, jurisdiction. You're just renting it. So, do they have the authority to come and talk to you and detain you here in the United States for like using a false name on an oath or simulating a legal process or any number of other crimes against the United States that we'll get into in more detail? Let's see what detaining citizens, law of armed conflict. This was Lindsey Graham, Senator Lindsey Graham, and Justice Kavanaugh. Now, Supreme Court hearing. So let's just listen in for a bit, and we'll all start at the same place and go from here.
So when somebody says post 9/11 that we've been at war and it's called the war on terrorism, do you generally agree with that concept?
I do, Senator, because Congress passed the authorization for use of military force, which is still in effect, and that was passed, of course, on September 14th, 2001, 3 days later.
Let's talk about the law in war. Is there a body of law called the law of armed conflict?
There is such a body, Senator.
Is there a body of law that's called basic criminal law?
Yes, Senator.
Are there differences between those two bodies of law?
Yes, Senator.
From an American citizen's point of view, do your constitutional rights follow you? If you're in Paris, does the Fourth Amendment protect you as an American from your own government?
From your own government, yes.
Okay. So if you're in Afghanistan, do your constitutional rights protect you against your own government?
If you're an American in Afghanistan, you have constitutional rights as against the U.S. government.
Is there a long-standing...
That's long settled law.
Isn't there also a long-settled law that it goes back to the Eisentrager case? I can't remember the name of it.
Yeah, Johnson versus Eisentrager.
Right. That American citizens who collaborate with the enemy have considered enemy combatants.
They can be. They can be. They're sometimes criminally prosecuted, sometimes treated in the military.
Well, let's talk about can be. I think
under Supreme Court precedent.
Right. There's a Supreme Court decision that said that American citizens who collaborated with Nazi saboteurs were tried by the military. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I think a couple of them were executed.
Yeah.
So if anybody doubts, there's a long-standing history in this country that your constitutional rights follow you wherever you go, but you don't have a constitutional right to turn on your own government and collaborate with the enemy of the nation. You'll be treated differently. What's the name of the case, if you can recall, that reaffirmed the concept that you could hold one of our own as an enemy combatant if they were engaged in terrorist activities in Afghanistan? Are you familiar with that case?
Yeah, Hamdi.
Okay. So the bottom line is, I want every American citizen to know you have constitutional rights, but you do not have a constitutional right to collaborate with the enemy. There's a body of law well developed long before 9/11 that understood the difference between basic criminal law and the law of armed conflict. Do you understand those differences?
I do understand that they're different bodies of law, of course, Senator.
Okay, then. So that's how he feels about it. And so these people could come and talk to you at your office if necessary. And that's what this video is about, is number one, to show lawyers and lawmakers game is up. And hopefully, number two, to show the citizenry, maybe some of the things that are in place by the laws of armed conflict that we can use for our protection. Because we all have, a little bit different statuses. But so, for instance, this is in, as we'll see, it comes out of a field manual for the military, but it's actually out of the Geneva Convention. And it says, in the case of armed conflict, not of an international character, well, that would be domestic, occurring in the territory of one of the high contracting parties, that would be the United States, each party to the conflict shall be bound to apply as a minimum the following provisions, which means the United States has to provide this. Persons taking no active part in the hostilities, including members of the armed forces who have laid down their arms, and those placed forced the combat, in other words, out of action or out of the fight or whatever it is, by sickness, wounds, detention, or any other cause, shall in all circumstances be treated humanely without any adverse distinction founded on race, color, religion, faith, sex, birth, wealth, or any other similar criteria. To this end, the following acts are and shall remain prohibited at any time and in any place whatsoever with respect to the above-mentioned persons. What persons? Well, the persons taking no active part in the hostilities, comma. That'd be, pretty much everybody except the attorneys and lawmakers. So what are some of the things? Well, violence to life and person, in particular, murder of all kinds, mutilation, cruel treatment, and torture. Well, they do that when they throw your ass in jail for a simulated legal process. All of those have just happened. Oh, and taking of hostages. Well, that would be taking a hostage, holding you for ransom to get some dollars out of you. Outrages upon personal dignity, in particular, humiliating and degrading treatment, like putting it in the newspaper. D, this is my favorite, the passing of sentences and the carrying out of executions without previous judgment pronounced by a regularly constituted court, according all the judicial guarantees which are recognized and indispensable by civilized peoples. And that's where it stops there. But you heard Lindsey Graham talk about the Fourth Amendment and the laws of armed conflict. And the Fourth Amendment says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Well, if they're not using your full legal name and they're not using their full legal name, well, then how can you be secure in your person's houses, papers, or effects? First of all, you're not secure in your person because they're not using your full legal name. And you're not secure in your houses, papers, and effects because they're not using their full legal name. You really don't know who they are that are taking your property. They just say they're the frickin' the government. But when you look at their oaths of office and certificates of election or whatever they may have, you'll find out that they ain't got shit. That what they have are counterfeit securities. Counterfeit certificates of public securities of the United States. Things that we would depend on for somebody to say they have authority, they have counterfeited. Because they didn't use their full legal name. First name, middle names, last name, no initials, no nicknames. It's written in 6 CFR, Code of Federal Regulations, Part 37, the Real ID Act, for official purposes, full legal name. First name, middle names, last name, or surname, comma, no nicknames, no initials. So if you look at court paperwork or you look at any kind of paperwork and you see somebody's got a middle initial name, well, that is not official. There's something wrong with that. And that's what they're doing. And they want to act like it's no big deal. And I think it's a big-ass deal. And I think it's enough to have you tried for treason if you don't stop. We'll see if we can do it. Just keep it up. Hey, my email, Rob Ryder, email, quarterrecord at AOL.com, and my phone number is 616-712-6179. So give me just a minute to reload some papers here, and we'll look at some of the things that we can use and point our fingers at them and say that they're doing. Hang on just a second. Okay, so before we get into the laws of armed conflict proper, let's talk about a few things that are just the basics, right? And I went into more detail on them on my last few videos, which was veterans entitled domestic peacemakers, and election fraud and other high crimes and misdemeanors, which you can find on Rob Ryder, ROBBBRYDER, at AOL.com. Crimes Act of 1790, that will tell you where these offenses against the United States, like a counterfeit certificate of the United States, comes from, and that these were laws passed by the first Congress after the ratification of the Constitution. So this is what the people who wrote the Constitution wanted it to mean, and they wrote it. Right? First in time is first in line. So Scrivener errors, that well, that would apply. All these really apply, but more on this military aspect. Hey, Grunt, I'm talking to you. The sin of omission, classification of 1H. That's one thing they did to all of us. They made everybody in the selective service system a 1H, which means you're rated as a 1A, but you're not available for 1A. Well, that would mean that you're a deserter if you're not available. Right? So they made everybody a deserter. This is, all these little things, wheels and wheels they have going on. But what I wanted to show you then is just some basics where a lot of this stuff comes from. And let's just start here. So here are some generalities of what you would find that makes somebody's oath of office wrong. Like in this case, this will be an oath of office for somebody, and it says State of Michigan, County of Kent, but they're going to be the Kent County Clerk in the County of Kent. Well, Kent County and County of Kent aren't the same thing, right? And then these words here were added to the oath that's in the Constitution. So they didn't take the oath that's in the Constitution, they made up their own. And then in most of these cases, these people, have a middle name and they're not using it. I know that some people don't have middle names, and just is. But a lot of people do. And if it's part of your legal name, first name's, middle name's, last name, or surname, no initials, no nicknames, well, you're supposed to use it for official purposes. And if an oath of office isn't official, then I don't have to listen to you. You don't have any authority. Right? Same thing with this. Like Diane, I know that she's got a middle initial. I saw in another one, a C, right? She's got a middle name, but it's not on this. And she didn't take the oath of office that's in the Constitution of the state of Michigan. Right? These are counterfeit certificates of public securities in the United States, things that we would depend on to let us know these people are supposed to have this type of power. Here's one for a prosecutor, right? Where, again, it's the county of Kalkaska, but he says he's going to be the prosecutor and attorney for Kalkaska County. They're not the same venue. He used a middle initial, not his legal name. Signed by somebody using the middle initial. That isn't their legal name. Right? These people don't have any authority. They're warring with the Constitution. Right? Here's a guy using a P. William O'Grady, right? He's got a first name, but he's not using it. Can't use an initial. Right, so that's the first telltale. Are they using the middle initial? If you look at court cases and you look at where the attorneys are signing, they all use middle initials, or they're not using their full legal name because they have a middle name, and you can kind of bounce it off of what you find on the state bar website. For all the attorneys are usually listed on the state bar, or look at their frickin' business card or whatever you need to see they're not using their full legal name. Right? Here's a guy with a middle initial. Not his. And the guy we saw before, not his. And, what the fuck? Here's the moose looking over his back instead of at the shield. They got a counterfeit seal. I'm sure that was funny. So there's all sorts of things that are wrong. So as you can see, they're using middle initial names. Well, In the military, they don't do that. Here's one for a commissioned officer. I, first name, middle name, last name, and your social security number. This is like your name and your social security, so now it's authenticated which particular first, middle, last name they're speaking of. Right? This social security number authenticates the person. Or it should, except they did something to the records in social security where on their forms they don't consider your middle name part of your legal name. And so they take it out of your legal name and cloud the title to your social security account. That's for a different subject. I, first, middle, last names. This is for the National Guard. So, the military is taking an oath using their first, middle, and last. Then why aren't judges? In fact, that's just a start. We'll go look at the congressional record from January 27, 2017 in the House of Representatives, where they're getting started. Where was it in here? They're going to put everybody's oath to office. But look at how they did this. Okay, first they started some business at like 2 in the afternoon, and then they had an adjournment. The Speaker pro tempore, without objection, the House stands adjourned until noon on Monday next for morning hour debate. There was no objection. Thereupon, at 2:05 p.m., under its previous order, the House adjourned until Monday, January 30th, 2017, at noon for a morning hour debate. Okay, so now the House is closed, right? On January 27, 2017. It's not going to open up again until the 30th. And yet, what's the next thing they do? Because on the next page, we're still on January 27th, right? We didn't change. Well, now they're going to do the oath of office of members, resident commissioners, and delegates, where they're going to take this oath here. I, A.B., do solemnly swear and affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will take this obligation freely without any mental reservation, purpose of evasion, that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of this office, which I am about to enter, so help me God. Well, that isn't the constitutional oath of office they're supposed to take. It's an oath they can take. I mean, that's 5 U.S.C. 3331, but this has a religious test to it. And in the Sixth Amendment, or in the Sixth Article of the Constitution, it says that you need to take an oath to support the Constitution with no religious test. So this doesn't cut the mustard. And this really isn't, as it says up here, provided by this section. That's for something else, but forgetting all that. So they've adjourned, and now they're going to pretend like all these people have taken their oath of office, and there isn't any of them using their full legal name, right? They're either using like nicknames like Mike, or they're using middle initials, or some other defect, but none of these people that are listed here in the congressional record on January 27, 2017 have filed a frickin' oath of office that's worth a damn. What they have filed instead are counterfeit certificates of public securities of the United States. And they either need to be immediately corrected or they need to be arrested. So it's a big problem. It ain't just, the county clerk. No, this is every member of the House. And I'm sure if you go look at the Senate, you're going to find the same thing. Just go to the clerk's office. That's where the papers are, right? Go check their papers. Now, they were saying in here that they were taking this oath that satisfied the 6th Article of the Constitution. The oath of office required by the 6th Article of the Constitution of the United States and as provided in subsection 2 of some act. This isn't that because the oath in the 6th Article doesn't allow for a religious test. But again, the very first Congress, in fact, this is the very first law passed after the Constitution was ratified. An act to regulate time and manner of administering certain oaths, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled, that the oath or affirmation required by the 6th article of the Constitution of the United States shall be administered in the following form, to wit, I, A.B., do solemnly swear or affirm, as the case may be, that I will support the Constitution of the United States. There is no other oath to take, right? That isn't the oath they took. They didn't satisfy the 6th article of the Constitution. I don't know what else to say. Okay, hang on just a second, please. Okay, so Senator Graham says we're under the laws of armed conflict. I showed this in my last video, I think, just to cover. There's a manual called the Law of Armed Conflict Desk Book. It's put out by the Judge Advocate General's Legal Center and School. Well, again, I'm really not going to read this book, but just go to the preface to see where it says, notice the Law of Armed Conflict Desk Book was edited and prepared, blah, 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 blah. And they're talking about once FM 627 is published, citations referenced by old FM 27-10 will be replaced in the next edition of the Laws of Armed Conflict, because the Army has a field manual, 27-10. The Law of Land Warfare, yeah, they got a book. We're in the Laws of Armed Conflict. We're pulling out different books. We're going to pull out the book on the Law of Land Warfare and see if in here there's a remedy for civilians from the belligerents, or at least to not be considered a belligerent. And so we'll just quickly, let's see, and then there's a couple other manuals. Wherever possible, this manual should be used in conjunction with TM 27251 and FM 275. We'll have to go look for those. Rourke Pack, that's interesting. That's in here. And we're going to see, this is, these are all the different treaties, basically. Just the abbreviations are given for all these treaties that have something to do with the laws of armed conflict, because there are laws that govern it. Well, they can be broken like any other law, but hey, there's laws, and one of them is the Rourke Peace Pact. Treaty on Protection of Artistic and Scientific Institutions and Historic Monuments, 15 April 1935, and not just the monuments, but the members of these institutions, as we will see. So, Chapter 1, Basic Principles, or Basic Rules and Principles. Purpose and scope. The purpose of this manual is to provide authoritative guidance to military personnel on the customary and treaty law applicable to conduct of warfare on land and to relationships between belligerents and neutral states. This manual is an official publication of the United States Army. That means it's official. Purposes of the law of war to conduct armed hostilities on land is regulated by the law of land warfare, and which is both written and unwritten. It is inspired by the desire to diminish evils of war by protecting both combatants and non-combatants from unnecessary suffering, safeguarding certain fundamental human rights of persons who fall into the hands of the enemy, particularly prisoners of war, the wounded, the sick, civilians, did I say that again? One more time, civilians, and facilitating the restoration of peace. Basic principles. They're binding on states and individuals. The law of war is binding not only on states as such, but also upon individuals, and in particular, the members of their armed forces. The laws of war is derived from treaties, right? Treaties may be compared with legislative enactments in national law of the United States and the customary law of war with the unwritten Anglo-American common law. Oh, okay. Treaties and customs. There's where it was. That's the one I wanted to see. Customs. Right? 2 points. You get either from a treaty or from a custom. That's the only two things that have anything to do with the laws of war. All right, you can throw out the state code, I guess. Lawmaking treaties. Treaties to which the United States is a party. Oh, they'd be one of the high contracting parties then. The United States is a party. They're filing conventions. You got the Hague Convention. You got the Hague Convention. Hey, you got the Hague Convention and the Hague Convention and the Hague Convention and the Geneva Convention and the Geneva Convention and the Treaty on the Protection of Artistic and Scientific Institutions and Historic Monuments of 15 April. It's actually 1935. It's not 1985. It's 1935 under Franklin Roosevelt. Only the United States and a number of American republics are parties to this treaty. Now, these American republics, they make up the Organization of American States, the OAS. Some people call it the Agenda 2030 people or something like that. But, you know, it's a system that's been already developed under for quite some time. It's like a whole government system, but just nobody's under it. Nevertheless, the United States is a party to this treaty, and what's happening is happening in the United States. Therefore, hey, it's protected. And maybe now is the time to look at that and get that taken care of real quick. So give me just a second to pull that up. Okay. So again, this is in FM Field Manual 27-10, United States Army, Laws of Land Warfare, which said there's lawmaking treaties that have to do with the laws of armed conflict, and a bunch of Hague Convention ones, and the Geneva Convention, and then we got to this treaty on the protection of artistic and scientific institutions and historic monuments. You know, it's interesting that would have been thrown in there. And some more Geneva, 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 Geneva. So what's different about this one real quick? Well, we can go look at that. Protection of artistic and scientific institutions and historical monuments. In which it says the historic monuments, museums, scientific, artistic, educational, and cultural institutions shall be considered as neutral and as such respected and protected by belligerents. The same respect and protection shall be due to the personnel of the institutions mentioned above. The same respect and protection shall be accorded to the historic monuments, museums, scientific, artistic, educational, cultural institutions in time of peace as well as in war. Right, so if there was a way for you to become a member of one of these things they're talking about, then if you went to court or you got pulled over by a cop or whatever the situation, you would hand over your identification that identified you with this entity to say, hi, I'm protected by a treaty, by an international peace treaty. Right? And start there instead of just handing over your driver's license and, like people say, then you're showing that you're contracting with them. Well, if you're going to contract in a way that's to your benefit, and until then, you're protected by a peace treaty. Now, this thing has got a thing called the Banner of Peace. It's a symbol, the Warwick Pact. The pact was first, maybe I should finish reading that in the thing. In order to identify the monuments and institutions mentioned in Article 1, use may be made of the distinctive flag, red circle with triple red sphere in the circle of white background in accordance with the model attached to this treaty. Well, that's what that is. That's what it looks like. It looks like this. So if you could get an ID that had that on there, right, and then had your name and so forth, well, would that satisfy the powers that be? They actually have flags, like, here's one that's flying over the Nicholas Roerich Museum, which is the guy that put this thing together. And so, in fact, I just emailed them last night to ask them if they have a membership form to get. Right? But they give you a form that has a membership card that has that symbol on there that you could use as part of your ID. Now, my brother-in-law Brian, who he had been a legal aid in the Marines and for battalion legal aid while he was convalescing, had told me for some reason or other, I can't remember why, but he said that when he got pulled over, he would hand his driver's license and his library card to the cop because the library card is what establishes your residence. And I thought that was interesting. So I said, okay, well, this would be the same thing. If you could get your library to be a member of this group, well, that would be great. But if you can't, then find someplace that is and become a member of it. That's what I'm going to try to do. And so the Nicholas Roerich Museum, right? They exist. Here they are. They got a website. And they got a museum, and they got a mission, and they have a gift store, a gift shop. So I'm just wondering, hey, you got a commemorative membership card that you can give if somebody donates to the museum. Okay. Okay, so I'm just saying there's a way to try to use one of the treaties that are in FM 27-10 to your advantage. But you have all these other ones to pick from. If you want to go find one of these and find something in there and can get whoever it is that you need to buy into it, and it works, well, please call and tell me. Right? But take this shit to the judge and say, Judge, they're the belligerent, not me. Right? Don't make the judge the enemy. Make the person that brought you to court. They're the false accuser that brought you to this improper court. Because these courts that we're going to, this is the important thing, these courts that we're going to do not, the passing of sentences and carrying out of executions without previous judgment pronounced by regularly constituted court according all the judicial guarantees which are recognized as indispensable by civilized peoples, that is not the court you're going to for a foreclosure or a traffic ticket or a criminal matter or any other thing. It's a false accusation because none of these people have an oath of office. They don't have the authority to bring your ass to court. Not under any, they could do it as a citizen now if they were using their full legal name, right? But they can't do it as an officer of a court or the government because they ain't got a proper oath of office. They're just pretending. They have a counterfeit security, right? So they're a belligerent, engaged in an insurrection, and they call themselves lawyers. Some of them act as lawmakers, but they're definitely not working in the United States for the United States or its citizens. Okay, then we got customs. Evidence of customary law of war arising from general consent of the states may be found in judicial decisions, the writings of the jurists, diplomatic correspondence, and other documentary material concerning the practices of the states. Until a more complete code of laws war has been issued, the high contracting parties deem it expedient to declare that in case not included in the regulations adopted by them, inhabitants and the belligerents remain under the protection and rule of the principles of law of nations as they result from the usages established among civilized people, from the laws of humanity and dictates of the public conscience. Force of law of war. The treaty provisions quoted in this manual in boldface are contained in treaties which have been ratified without reservation except as otherwise noted by the United States. So the United States has to follow these particular treaties that are in this manual. Now, don't take it to an attorney. You'd have to take it to the Army and say, well, this is your manual. This is what it says. Right? I guess if you went to court, you need to say, I need to talk to somebody from JAG, the Judge Advocate General's office. Right? Because this country is under the laws of war, and only they have jurisdiction. And then quote your treaty of choice and See what happens then. For these reasons, the treaty provisions quoted herein will be strictly observed and enforced by United States forces without regard to whether they are legally binding upon this country. Without regard to whether they are legally binding upon this country. They're going to enforce them. Right? Go tell the military, enforce the damn treaty. Claim to be protected by the Geneva Convention. Just tell them we're under the laws of armed conflict. That I'm a citizen, that I'm a civilian under the Geneva Convention, and I demand to be protected. Force of treaties under the Constitution. Under the Constitution of the United States, treaties constitute part of the supreme law of the land. In consequence, treaties relating to the law of war have the force equal to that of laws enacted by the Congress. Situations which the law of war are applicable. Types of hostilities. War may be defined as a legal condition of armed hostility between states. While it is usually accompanied by a commission of acts of violence, a state of war may exist prior to the subsequent to the use of force. So in 1863, Abraham Lincoln suspends the Constitution, puts us under martial law, because he suspended the right of habeas corpus. And when you suspend any part of the Constitution is suspended. You can't pick and choose. So he suspended the Constitution and put us into martial law. Well, at the end of the war, none of the governors wanted to get the power back because they had all been made commanders-in-chief of their state militias. And they were going to use that to their advantage. So one of the theories is that's why they killed Lincoln. Because he wanted to take it back, right? He was going to get it back, and they didn't want to give it back. Well, we've been under laws of war ever since, in one form or fashion, and I don't care what they call it. If there's in the Lieber Code, which is another thing that Lincoln wrote, or during the time of Lincoln's presidency, it says in the second article that once martial law has been declared, right, that it can only be rescinded by a treaty of peace or a special proclamation, neither of which have happened since the Civil War, nor did they happen after World War I. So, now we have both the domestic and the international covered as wars that are still ongoing because there's never been peace treaties in these things, and it doesn't really matter what happened afterwards. That the law of war was on from there, and it's never been rescinded. And that's why they have all these, national emergencies and executive orders and all of these things that would be done under martial law that aren't done as a president. If the president was going to issue a proclamation, that would be as a president. But if he does an executive order, well, that's more like him as the chief executive, the chief magistrate, the commander-in-chief. Instances of armed conflict without declaration of war may include, but not necessarily limited to. So, again, we don't have to have them say we're under war force to be under. Yet, Senator Lindsey Graham and Justice Kavanaugh both agree that we're under the laws of armed conflict. In the exercise of the inherent right of individual or collective self-defense against armed attack or in performance of enforcement measures through a regional arrangement or otherwise in uniformity with appropriate provisions of the United Nations Charter. Yes, we're being governed by international law because laws of war are international. Customary law of war applies in all cases to all cases of declared war or any other armed conflicts which may arise between the United States and other nations, even if the state of war is not recognized by one of them. The customary law is applicable to all cases of occupation of foreign territory by exercise of armed forces, even if the occupants meet with no armed resistance. And that's why there's U.S. flags flying in these state courthouses, and you got gold fringed flags and so forth, because the United States, the Union, is at war with the states because the states have failed to send any representatives to Congress. They just send a bunch of people pretending, but they ain't the government because they don't have a proper oath of office and they need to be arrested. Right? Either start over and everybody do it right, or they're gone. And I don't know if these people can be saved. They may just need to go, right, and put new people in. I won't say that. They're probably the most qualified if they just do the right thing. Treaties governing land warfare are applicable to various forms of war and armed conflict as provided by their terms. The Hague Convention apply to war. Common Article 2, the Geneva Convention, 1949 states. The convention shall also apply to all cases of partial and total occupation of the territory of a high contracting party, even if said occupants meet with no armed resistance. Right? The states say, well, we're not at war with you, but they haven't sent anybody to Congress, so they are at war. Civil war. The customary law of war becomes applicable to civil war upon recognition of the rebels as belligerents. And so we just need to say, hey, they're belligerents, and now customary law takes over. But in the Geneva Convention, it says, and this is where I had read earlier, in the case of armed conflict, not of an international character, which would mean domestic, occurring in the territory of one of the high contracting parties, which would be the United States, each party to the conflict shall be bound to apply as a minimum the following provisions. The passing of sentences and carrying out of executions without previous judgment pronounced by a regularly constituted court, affording all judicial guarantees which are recognized as indispensable by civilized peoples. Well, I can tell you that isn't what's happening. You just need to look at the paperwork that they're using in court, and you would have to agree. Military government and martial law distinguished. In the practice of the United States, military government is a form of administration which may be established or maintained by the government or for the government of areas of the following types that have been subjected to military occupation. You got your enemy territory, you got your allied territory, you got other territory, and you have domestic territory. All of those can be covered by either martial law or military rule. Other countries exercise jurisdiction in occupied areas through types of administration analogous to military government. The United States martial law is temporary government of the civil population of the domestic territory through the military forces without the authority of written law as necessary as necessity may require. Without the authority of written law as necessity may require. Well, then whose decision is it? It's the commander's decision. Who's the military commander? Well, the one I think of is the captain at the armory. Right? He's a commander. Any company commander is a commander. That's why they're called a commander. It's like the lowest level commander is somebody over a company of people. Of soldiers, not people, soldiers. The most prominent distinction between military government, as the term is used herein, and martial law is that the former, that would be military government, is generally exercised in the territory of or territory formerly occupied by a hostile belligerent and is subject to restraints imposed by international law of belligerent occupation. While the later, that would be martial law, is invoked only in domestic territory, the local government and inhabitants of which are not treated or recognized as belligerents, and is governed solely by the domestic law of the United States. So far as the United States forces are concerned, military government and martial law are exercised by a military commander under the direction of the president as commander-in-chief of the armed forces. That's all I care about is how does the United States forces feel about it. So what is the domestic law of the United States then? Well, that would be like the United States Code. Title 10, United States Code, covers the military. In Title 10, it says if there's an ongoing insurrection and the civil government can't enforce the laws of the state or the United States, then it's the duty, D-U-T-Y, duty of the military to do it. Right? So we don't have a civilian jurisdiction anymore. We're just all military jurisdiction. Military jurisdictions is of two kinds. First, that which is conferred by that branch of country's municipal law, which regulates its military establishment. Well, I think that'd be Title 10, United States Code. Second, that which is derived from international law, including the law of war. In the Army of the United States, military jurisdiction is exercised through the following military tribunals. You got your court-martial, military commission, a provost court, other military tribunals. Take note, it is generally held that military commission and other similar tribunals have no jurisdiction of such purely military offenses specified in the Uniform Code of Military Justice as are expressly made published by sentence of court-martial. I'm going to read that again. It has generally been held that the military commission and similar tribunals have no jurisdiction of such purely military offenses specified in the UCMJ as expressly made punishable by sentence of court-martial. Okay, so they don't do court-martial things, which are people in the military, and they must be charging people that aren't in the military. In practice, offenders who are not subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice, but who, by law of war, are subject to trial by military tribunals, that would be if you're a belligerent or an enemy combatant, are tried by military commission, provost courts, and other forms of military tribunals. In areas occupied by United States forces, military jurisdiction over individuals other than members of the armed forces who are charged with violating legislation or orders of the occupant is usually exercised by military government courts. Although sometimes designated by another name, these tribunals are actually military commissions. They sit in and for the occupied area and are thus exercise their jurisdiction on a territorial basis. So is that what the U.S. District Court of the Western District of Michigan is? Is that a military commission? Or are those people just pretending to be? In the area occupied by United States forces, well, they occupy the United States. I got an armory just down the road. It's got an American flag, got troops, got camouflage vehicles. It got all the things you would say, well, that's the Army of the United States. So, yeah, it's occupied by United States forces. The territory of the United States is occupied by United States forces. Military jurisdiction over individuals other than members of the armed forces who are charged with violating legislation or orders of the occupant. Well, who's the occupant? Well, that's the United States, right? So you're violating the legislation or orders of the United States is usually exercised by military government courts. Although sometimes designated by another name, these tribunals are actually military commissions. They sit in and for the occupied area and thus exercise their jurisdiction on a territorial basis. I'd have to ask a judge that. Judge, according to the laws of armed conflict, actually according to Field Manual 27-10, Article 13, military jurisdiction, it says, here, Judge, I'll just bring it up to you. Just copy this page and give it to the judge. Judge, are we in a military commission right now? Are you a military commission? I need to know what jurisdiction I'm under. Is this a military jurisdiction? See, because that's what they're doing somehow, right? I'm not going to. I know the judge knows what's going on, but if you're going to divide Satan's house, then you kind of got to leave the judge alone and go after the false accuser that took you to the judge. Because if he's acting as a military commission, well, he can, make the right decision. And if he isn't, well, then we can go get him with the military commission. Because they're not properly constituted courts. Right? Because they're passing the sentences and carrying out of execution without previous judgment pronounced by a regularly constituted court. Well, if you're not using your full legal name on oath of office, I'm afraid that's not a regularly constituted court. And I'm not being afforded all the judicial guarantees which are recognized as indispensable by civilized peoples. And one of those was in the Fourth Amendment. We could just say the whole Constitution as far as that goes, but if I had to get down to one, well, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing a place to be searched and persons or things to be seized. And so lawmakers and lawyers, you need to stop, because you're in violation of laws of armed conflict. In fact, here just the other day, because here's an example, right? This is the docket for a court case where it says the name of the defendant is Smith, Dana. Well, that isn't the name of the. If that's the name of the defendant, then that's not Dana Reed Smith, the person they're taking in and wanting to be Smith, Dana. They may use Dana Reed Smith on paper that's in the fake court, but the court docket says it's Smith Dana. It doesn't have a middle name. Well, the people that are running this show in Michigan, the prosecutor's elected office, and he filed a counterfeit public security. And we had put all this information together. I'd helped put it together for Dana, had Dana sent it to all these different places. But just here on Wednesday, he went down to the sheriff's department and was finally able to file a complaint based on this election fraud that's going on, because the people that say they're elected aren't, because they don't have a proper oath of office. And one of the things we pointed out to them is that in the Michigan election law, it says, it is hereby made the duty of any police, sheriff, or other peace officer present and having knowledge of any violation of any of the provisions of this act, what act? The Election Law Act, to forthwith institute criminal proceedings for the punishment of such offender. And so we're going to see what comes of that. But I'll have that in my next video, and I'm going to try to get Dana on the phone, and we'll just talk about what's happened over the past time we've been working on his court case. So what I told Dana by email, then I haven't talked to him yet, is to get a hold of that sheriff's deputy and tell him to send a copy to the military. In Grayling, Michigan, they have a National Guard training facility, so they have military police up there, and send them a copy. And to send a copy to a guy, to the chaplain. And I really have time to talk about chaplains right now, but understand that the chaplain is the tie between the church and the state. Secular organizations have chaplains assigned to them. But the chaplain is an ordained minister of some denomination that's just not ordained, but they have also had an ecclesiastic endorsement. And so if there was going to be a civil authority ordained by God, it could very easily be the chaplain. And so it's an interesting study all on its own, but it wasn't really meant for this video. This video was was for me to give notice to lawmakers and lawyers that my plan is to get the military to come and ask you for your identification. and if necessary, to detain you. If that means a FEMA camp, well, so be it. Right? That's up to you. But you're going to use a proper oath of office, or you're not going to pretend to hold any authority under the United States anymore. And attorneys do take an oath of office. You still have that up here? Yeah. Here's the lawyer's oath for Michigan. Lawyer's oath. I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Michigan. I don't need to go any further. You're not supporting the Fourth Amendment in the way that you're handling, you call a court case. And did you use your full legal name? Would be the other thing I need. I've never actually seen one of these yet. I wonder if we can get a copy to see how they've been signed by somebody's full legal name, right? Print the oath suitable for framing. Isn't that pretty? Right? But there's no place to sign it. So it hasn't been subscribed. And it wasn't subscribed in their full legal name, obviously. Okay, I think that's it for today. Just what you might be able to use, like the Rourke Peace Pack. We'll have to see how that turns out. Saying that that it's a false security of the United States going to the military, and that's the direction I'm headed, because I just don't see any relief acting like these are civil courts anymore, and that they're doing anything legally, because they're not. Everything they do is a simulated legal process, and it's an offense against the United States. And they either need to stop or they need to be arrested for a felony against the United States and possibly treason. All right. Y'all have a great day. See you.